Local productions seen on Delta College Public Media are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Redford, and this is the follow-up. Coming up on tonight's show, climate change and the growing debate about its impact and how far we go with potential solutions to combat it here at home and globally. We'll focus in large part on what proponents say are climate change-related weather extremes and the cost it's having on our health and environment, while critics say the measures put in place to slow the effects of climate change go too far and not worth the cost. A public health officer and a renowned environmental activist join us live here on the follow-up next. But first, we have viewer reaction from last week's show here on the follow-up. We talked about staffing shortages in our schools and its negative impact on education. In this email from Paula, she writes, "More and more it seems parents and other community members across the nation are influencing and harassing school boards and other education personnel with issues such as critical race theory and book banning, based primarily on misinformation. Perhaps this is not a problem locally. I formerly taught English at Eaton Rapids High School, and if I had been subjected to outside scrutiny, classroom cameras enabling public access, or requiring teachers to present lesson plans for an entire academic year for advanced public scrutiny, I would have left the profession." Well, thanks, Paula, for watching, and thank you for your comments. And we'd like to hear from more of you to help drive the conversation here on the show. You can do that via social media on Facebook. You can email us, as Paula just did. You can dial into our follow-up hotline to voice your opinion or suggest future show topics. And you can leave your comments on YouTube as well. And if you'd like to watch any of our past shows, just log on to deltapublicmedia.org. Now for tonight's show, we have two special guests joining me in the studio. Regular here, Peter Sinclair from Midland. He is a renowned environmentalist and activist on climate change, among other things. And joining us live via remote from the Dearborn area, Ali Abazeed. He is the Chief Public Health Officer in the city of Dearborn. He is also a professor at Wayne State University in the Department of Public Health. Thank you guys for joining us.
Great to be here.
So the effects of climate change, as you guys well know, and the things we're doing to try to combat it, huge issue, controversial, debatable, everybody's got an opinion. We're not going to take on all of that tonight, but our goal tonight is to heighten people's awareness of it and its effects on so many levels right here in our backyard. So Ali, I'm going to start with you. You wrote a really interesting commentary, op-ed in the Free Press recently that pointed to these extreme weather events that we've had in the past year and a half, how it's impacting our environment, public health, social fabric, it goes on and on. So let's maybe highlight that extreme weather, those events that you wrote about, and why this should be a wake-up call for all of us. Well, I guess we don't have Ali, but we'll try to dial him in a moment. In the meantime, I'll go to Peter.
Sure.
Peter, you and I sort of read that article. He talked about wind. He talked about flooding and its effect on environment, social fabric. Maybe you can kind of paraphrase a little bit what kind
well,
to get into
Ali used the phrase climate haven. And a lot of people have thought of Michigan as someplace where we would be shielded from the effects of climate change. Climate change is something that's happening in the Arctic or maybe in the distant future. But I think in 2023 we learned that climate change is affecting us very much in a personal way. The air that we were choking on in June, for instance, I think was a shock to a lot of people. And to see pictures of the Mackinac Bridge where you couldn't see the other side because of air pollution. What a blow to the heart, you know, of Michiganders.
Right.
And but not only that, the infrastructure that we rely on for our transportation, for storm sewer, for flood protection, you know, our own houses that were built with a certain set of weather extremes in mind. And those extremes have now changed so that those assumptions no longer apply, and that infrastructure is starting to fail.
Right.
You know, big case would be the dams that failed in Gladwin and Midland County in 2020. But Ali was inspired to write by severe storms that hit southeast Michigan just this past August. And what people are talking about is that, wait a minute, we just had a big flood here not too long ago. Now it's happening again. Has something gone wrong with our infrastructure? And the answer is really no. It's just the weather has changed in a way that is overwhelming the systems that we've been relying on.
You know, and for those out there that believe this extreme weather is simply typical or cyclical, here's a fact to think about. In the 80s, the country experienced, on average, $1 billion disaster every 4 months, now experiencing one every 3 weeks. And this year, this country has set a new record with $25 billion disasters. These 100-year floods are happening every 10 years. I mean, that makes the case for it, right?
Well,
Yeah.
you know, it's what scientists told us was going to happen. And what's remarkable is that the global temperature projections that scientists made 50 years ago are now proving out to be stunningly accurate. But what is concerning is that they didn't project very well how extreme some of the extreme events would be and what the effect would be on some of our human systems and our natural systems. You know, natural systems like the forests in Canada burning at a pace that nobody's ever seen. Human systems like, as Ali can speak to, you know, storm sewers and roads and other systems in southeast Michigan area.
So Ali, you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you now. Sorry for the technical difficulties. So we were kicking around a little bit about your article, but you're the one that wrote it, so we'll give you a chance to. What prompted you to write this article in regards to sort of weather-related, you know, extremes and its relation to climate change, and maybe highlight that article and what prompted you to what you want people to get out of it.
Yeah, with my apologies for the technical glitch, I think one thing that I think about when I think about climate change.
Oh no.
Well, that's live TV, folks.
Rapid changes, and so I had a rapid. Look, I'm a public health person, and can you hear me? Okay, Michael?
Yes, I can hear you. You're kind of going in and out, but let's keep giving it a shot.
We'll keep giving it a shot. Sorry about the technical glitches,
No, you're fine.
folks.
It's not on your end. That's live TV sometimes.
I'm a public health person, and public health teaches me, and the way that I practice it is, how do we think about the health and the well-being of people? Central to people's health and well-being is the built environment. That built environment is not ordained by divine order. That built environment isn't predestined. It is built by us. It is also constructed by our natural environment and the way in which we live our communities, and the communities where we live, where we work, where we learn, and where we play. And since coming back home to Southeast Michigan in spring 2022, one thing that I've been confronted with as Chief Public Health Officer of the City of Dearborn and Director of Public Health is how these environments are influencing people's health. And we had a summer of record-breaking events in all the worst ways possible. We had 23 days of air quality alerts, that's air quality gauged unhealthy or worse. We had the first ever, for state of Michigan, air quality alert for the entire state. We had our own rash of wildfires due to unprecedented hot and dry conditions. We had warnings based on a particulate matter, which is a form of pollution that wreaks havoc on human health. All of these things were happening, and it wasn't even the end of June yet. And so I thought to myself, how do we communicate this thing that sometimes seems really global, this phenomenon called climate change, something that we're all feeling, invariably feeling every single day. And that's what prompted me to write the piece.
So Peter, you've been advocating and talking about this stuff for years. What was it about what he wrote that maybe resonated with you, that maybe was a little different that people need to kind of take notice to?
Well, just that he's bringing it down to the practical experience people have in their day-to-day lives. And that's what people have to understand is this is hitting you when you when you walked out the door in June, you're suddenly choking on air that was all but unbreathable. You have now had the experience of not being able to come and go on some streets in southeast Michigan and even here in central Michigan because of weather events that have been kind of off the scale of what we have historically been used to. So I'm just trying to communicate to people that this is going to be hitting you in your lived experience day to day, but also in your pocketbook through things like repairs and upgrades to infrastructure, through things like the rates for your insurance on your home. Because throughout the country we're seeing huge increased pressure on insurance companies because of the increased pace of these natural disasters. And we should say the northeastern United States is getting just hammered with an extreme rain event as we speak. So this eventually we all end up paying for that because of additional these billion-dollar catastrophes that traditionally we've been able to handle through the economic tools of insurance companies, but those tools are being overwhelmed.
You know, Ali, in your article, you talked about how it's affecting the social fabric of society. Can you sort of define that and unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, it was a really interesting piece that was written this summer in a scientific journal that talked about climate tipping points, which refers to the point in which societies reach certain metrics that deem them irreversible. And so when we're talking about climate change, those of us who are familiar with the lingo and the vernacular, we often hear that a lot of the changes that are happening are irreversible, that the toothpaste goes out of the tube in one direction, and you cannot repair some of the damage that we're inflicting on our natural environment. One thing that I found fascinating was how do we combine the natural sciences with the social sciences, which often speaks more to human experience and human psychology. And so the concept of social tipping points when in relation to climate change is basically drawing a connection between these natural phenomena, these so-called natural phenomena, with certain changes in values and human behaviors. And look, it's really, it doesn't require gymnastics, mental gymnastics to be able to make that connection. If you are a part of a particular neighborhood that's constantly prone to, let's say, flooding, after the first flooding event, the second flooding event, the third flooding event, ultimately that built environment is being shifted and shaped by these so-called natural phenomena. These are also man-made phenomena, obviously, but the way that people understand it is these natural events are causing these changes. In the city of Dearborn in 2021, we had catastrophic flooding. We're one of the last cities that is downriver before the city of Detroit, before things get expelled into the Detroit River, and look, residents in Dearborn may not understand the science of climate change, but they sure as heck can feel climate change when all of their belongings, family photographs, wedding dresses are soaked in sewage water because of flooding due to the basement. And so I'm really fascinated by this idea of how our social fabric is changing as a result of climate change.
Along that line, Peter found this article, and I read it from the First Street Foundation, some findings, the research. Over 3.2 million Americans have left high flood risk neighborhoods, creating what's called climate abandonment areas, with an additional 7.5 million to follow over the next 30 years. So in these areas that are prone to flooding or tornadoes or high winds, people are leaving in drones, and it's just the population is migrating, moving into other areas. And along that note, and we can kick this around, wasn't too long ago they called sort of Michigan, parts of the Midwest, this climate haven, right? We are the perfect spot for people to leave with the temperatures are getting warmer, so our winters aren't as colder, and we don't have the the earthquakes and the flooding as much. So where are we with that now? So let's kick that around a little bit, right?
Well, Ali makes a great point, because certain areas of southeast Michigan have been getting hit again and again, and that's true just about everywhere. And people are noticing this, and the people that have the means to move are doing so. And often it doesn't mean they're leaving the state. Very often they'll stay in the same community, but they just move to a safer, maybe higher ground, you know. But people that don't have the means are left behind, or to see their home, which for most people is their largest financial nest egg, deteriorate in value. Because who's going to want to buy a home in an area that everyone now knows is continually flooding, and it can't be mitigated? Or the community faces a decision to spend a lot of money to upgrade flood controls to stop that from happening. But not every community can afford that. So I worry about hundreds of communities, small and large, where we have aging infrastructure. It's getting impacted by these extreme events, and it's gradually going to degrade property values and degrade people's wealth and sense of well-being across the state and across the country.
Right, and obviously the state, all the states, but Michigan particularly, and the feds are working on this, right? And I guess I'm going to shift gears along this same line to talk about the governor's sort of MI Healthy Climate Change Plan, which requires energy companies to meet 100% clean energy standards by 2040. Some would say that's pretty ambitious, but is it realistic? I think there are folks who make critics that say it's too much too soon. The government's kind of throwing this down our throats. We're really not ready for this, whether it's EVs or everything else. So what's your take on that plan overall?
The governor's plan is hugely ambitious, but at this point, not to be ambitious is to be unrealistic, given the gravity of the situation we are faced with. This is an unprecedented global emergency. I think it's appropriate to use that word. We have to make an energy transition for a number of reasons. If there were no climate change, we would still want to make this transition simply due to the economic benefits that it will bring. But obviously there are entrenched interests that would like to see this not happen. So they're putting out a lot of misinformation. Part of the work that I do is to push back on that with real facts and real information.
So can you give us some highlights of what some of the bigger pieces of misinformation that you kind of hear time and time again?
Well, time and time and time again, you will hear people say, we worry about the reliability of renewable energy. And I would just point out that U.S. News and World Report just put out a listing of the most reliable grids by state in America. Iowa, with 62%, more than 62% renewable energy, wind and solar, is number 10. It is the 10th most reliable grid. Michigan, with 85% coal, gas, and nuclear, purportedly the most reliable fuels, is 45th among the 50 states in reliability. So meanwhile, we look at Germany, which has something like half of its electricity coming from renewable energy. Their grid is 5 times more reliable than the U.S. grid as a whole. So a lot of these things that everybody, people will say, well, everybody knows that renewable energy is not reliable, but that does not bear out when you actually look at the numbers and the facts.
Sure. So Ali, I'm going to come to you a little bit. In your article, you mentioned we need to have this more regional cooperation, whether it's to rebuild the infrastructure, both water and electric grids, and transportation. You know, I'm a native Detroiter. You know, I see the queue line down there and the people mover, but we need something probably more than that in the Metro Detroit area, maybe an L or a light rail, a subway. So talk to us a little bit about what your thoughts are, and you're in the Metro Detroit area, about this regional cooperation and what can be done down there specifically, and if we'll ever see that, because everybody likes to be in their silos, but as you said, we're at a crisis stage for this. We need to start doing stuff now, and if we don't, um, we're in trouble. So why don't you have at that?
In Southeast Michigan, we have, it's both described as the economic hub and obviously the population epicenter of the state of Michigan. Wayne County alone has close to 2 million people, and that's about a quarter of the state. And so, when I think about communities downriver, when I think about cities like Detroit, I think about the ways in which uh, each of those communities experiences climate change on their own. But the reality is, climate change is felt across the board by everyone. But the ironclad law of climate change is that people closest to the pain are the people that are going to bear the brunt of climate change, of environmental injustice. And so cities like Dearborn can't solve climate change. Cities like Detroit can't solve climate change. They can't even help those in their communities who are most vulnerable mitigate and adapt to climate change. This requires regional coordination and collaboration. It requires cities to think and rethink ways of transit, think about new ways of communication, think about new ways of infrastructure. Take flooding, for example. We saw the state of Michigan, I don't know about you all, but roads look a heck of a lot better than they did a couple of years ago. But whenever I see a new road being paved, I see a missed opportunity there. There are missed opportunities for the ways in which we can use green infrastructure, whether you're discussing permeable pavers that are a lot more amenable to flooding and water runoff, whether you're thinking about tree canopy coverage and the way that those who live in historically redlined neighborhoods, for example, they experience 5 to 13 degrees warmer temperatures in the summer than their counterparts. How are we planting trees? Where are we planting trees? How are we thinking about green infrastructure? Those aren't things that cities can do on their own, let alone cities like Dearborn. These are things that require regional coordination.
Yeah, you make a good point, and along those lines, there's a lot of pressure on the energy companies. I'm thinking about DTE and Consumers Energy. That I know they're on the forefront of this. There's a lot more work to be done. There's a lot of money that it's going to take for them to do that. And one thing that I was hearing the CEO of Consumers Energy recently, I read this, that their current system, the way they design the standards for winds, for instance, their structures, their systems can withstand up to 40 mile per hour. Now they're saying, oh no, we have to change the system so it can withstand 80 miles per hour. So there's a lot of pressure there. And of course, consumers, all of us are consumers. We all feel it's going to get passed on to us, and we're going to catch the brunt of it, right?
Exactly so. Our transmission grid is 70 years old, and it was built to last for 50 years. So do the math. There's no path forward where we don't spend a lot of money upgrading our electrical grid. And we might as well do it with the most advanced technology, which is technology that uses fuel that is free and all around us and forever available, and combined with better transmission, with battery storage, and with smarter ways of moving energy around. So we know how to do this. We have the technology. It's just a matter of setting a goal, which lawmakers in Lansing did last month.
Ali, I know you said, I don't know if you said during the show or before, that you're a public health guy. You're not necessarily all about climate change, but something resonated in you that I had to put this out here, to heighten people's awareness. And so I'm just wondering what the reaction you got. Did it heighten people's awareness? Did you get some calls, some comments? Do you think, is this something you're continue to push in the Metro Detroit area to affect some change, or is it maybe fallen on deaf ears?
A lot of people reached out after the piece, letting me know that, I read your piece and this summer I felt off. Maybe I felt off because we've had these air quality alerts. Maybe I felt off because the air pollution in my community has been terrible. One thing that I like to emphasize is absolutely I'm a public health person, but recognizing that health is shaped by the environments in which we live, and climate change is going to continue to wreak havoc on public health. But the reality is, this is fundamentally about freedom. And I think those of us who believe in the science of climate change and also believe in the fact that it is changing the way that we live our lives need to talk about freedom a little bit more. How free are you if you can't step outside because you have COPD or asthma and there's an air quality alert in your neighborhood? How free are you if you are paying 28% above the national average on your electric rates, which is what Michigan residents pay on average? How free are you when we have the 46th most reliable grid in the state? How free are you if your belongings in your basement are being flooded and destroyed? The reality is, if you look across the street here in Detroit at Windsor, there are wind turbines from the river all the way through Toronto. But if you're driving up towards Saginaw and Flint, where it's completely rural, you don't see that wind infrastructure being built. You don't see that same wind profile, despite the fact that we have the same weather patterns. And so that's a categorical failure. We need to emphasize that. We need to discuss it. And that's the way that these conversations will continue to go, as far as I'm concerned.
You want to add to that?
Wow, that was that was well said, and we're going to have to talk some more because this is largely the work that I'm doing, and what we're finding is that out in the rural areas, farmers want to have these wind turbines. They want to host solar fields on their lands, but very often they're being held up, they're being stopped by a very well-coordinated campaign of misinformation and what I would call evil flash mobs that show up at township boards, just like the ones that show up that want to ban books or harass educators.
Right.
They show up at township boards to harass and physically threaten township officials to bully them into zoning out clean energy. But the farmers are starting to push back, and that it was really interesting that one of the farmers that
about 20 seconds. So
one of the farmers I know was on the podium with Governor Whitmer when she signed those energy bills, celebrating that.
Well, hopefully we heighten some people's awareness. Ali Abazeed from the city of Dearborn, Chief Public Health Officer, Peter Sinclair. I appreciate it. We'll do it again.
Yes, please.
Good luck with your work.
Thank you.
And that's our show for tonight, but be sure to join us again for the follow-up on January 9th. We're taking a little break for the holiday, and we'll be back then. Have a great holiday. We'll see you back in the new year. Have a good night, everyone.